Welcome to the latest addition to the Compliance Podcast Network, the podcast 10 for 10, which brings you the week's top 10 compliance stories curated together in one podcast each week. Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, brings you the compliance professional stories you need to be aware of at the end of your busy week. Sit back and in 10 minutes, hear about the stories every compliance professional should be aware of. Every Saturday, 10 for 10 highlights the most important news, insights, and analysis for the compliance professional, all curated by the voice of compliance, Tom Fox. Get your weekly filling of compliance stories with 10 for 10. Hosted by Tom Fox. 10 for 10 is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. 10 for 10 for the week ending March 22, 2025. First two stories come to us from Law 360, and unfortunately they are behind a paywall, but they're significant. The first is that one of the Cognizant executive defendants, Stephen Schwartz, fired his longtime counsel, Paul Weiss, after Trump's executive order differentiating the law firm from any work in federal courts. Of course, this order is illegal. Nevertheless, Schwartz felt like it would hurt his chances for a review of his case and or at trial if he had Paul Weiss as his counsel. This is obviously a horrifying development, and it makes clear that if you oppose the government, you're going to pay a sanction. Our second story from Law 360 is about the decision to self-disclose at this point, given the suspension of FCPA enforcement and a resolution or even investigation. What should you do if around self-disclosure? Well, of course, the problem is it's not clear what the rules are or what they will be going forward. My guess would be it would be something that you would want to consider under this administration. Nevertheless, James Koukios, our good friend, was quoted in the article and indicated that at least under the old rules of the old administrations, we had rules. Now we have no rules. So it's a bit of a crapshoot right now what the result would be. Of course, you would guess when Trump suspended the FCPA enforcement, be a good time to self-disclose. But really at this point, until there's guidance, we just don't know. Our next story comes to us from the BBC, which reports that Unilever, the owner of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, has fired its CEO over activism. And the allegation was part of a legal case filed in the U.S. by Ben & Jerry's that said Unilever violated a merger agreement by trying to silence its social mission. It comes a month after the ice cream company accused Unilever of demanding it stop publicly criticizing Donald Trump. Unilever said it was disappointed that the confidentiality of an employee career conversation has been made public. Of course, they're the one who fired him, so you would think it's a little enigmatic for a company who fires someone to say, oops, we don't want this to become public. Nevertheless, Ben & Jerry's is well known for taking public stances on social issues since it was founded, and Unilever and Ben & Jerry's have been at loggerheads at some time. You think they may have considered this. Perhaps they did. Next up, fluidity. I really like this article, and it comes to us from the New York Times, that trade policy is fluid now, and corporate America is basically trying to keep up with what Trump is doing. Many corporate executives are having trouble navigating the volume of tariff pronouncement and Trump's on-again, off-again approach. Certainty and clarity are two very valued business traits, but we don't seem to be having those right now. And our next story, also comes to us from the BBC, which said that every McDonald's in Britain has been warned that the owners of the franchise could face legal action if they fail to take steps to protect staff from sexual abuse. Each was warned that they must comply with legal duties or risk enforcement actions after a BBC investigation uncovered a claim of toxic culture across the United Kingdom. In January, McDonald's workers said they still face sexual harassment after a year after the CEO promised to clean things up, and of course, that hasn't happened. Our next story comes to us from Reuters, which looks at DOJ enforcement outlook in healthcare compliance for 2025. Some have predicted a drop in False Claims Act enforcement during the Trump administration, including DOJ-initiated and key TAM, but early part of the Trump first administration were consistent with prior amounts of filings. All signs point to continued robust FCPA enforcement, particularly in light of the Attorney General's commitment during her confirmation to support vigorous enforcement of the FCA, including through whistleblowers. The healthcare and life science industries, which has long dominated FCA enforcement, will remain a focus as the DOJ continues to prioritize traditional areas of enforcement, such as alleged kickbacks under the anti-kickback statute and other areas as well. Next up from the Financial Times, a very interesting piece that some of the top players in tennis, including Novak Djokovic, have sued the tennis ATP and other tennis foundations, alleging they run a cartel against basically against the players. The claims is the latest escalation of a push by players for bigger slices of the billions in revenue generated by professional tennis. And of course, the Tennis Federation wants to keep it all, and they don't want to share it with the players, i.e. the workers. Where does that sound familiar from? But here you have millionaires suing billionaires, which is a little bit different. Next up from Security Insights, a very interesting article on why CISOs quit the leadership crisis in cybersecurity. As many as 1 in 4 senior cybersecurity leaders plan to leave the profession. As many as half are even considering something like this. The causes are growing responsibility, severe threats, and ever greater regulatory burdens. CISOs are constantly fighting fires, moving from one crisis to the next. This leads to stress and burnout, and CISOs feel like they are not supported by their organization, that there's an invisibility of success. They're held accountable for security breaches, but not recognized for the attacks that they prevent and don't ever come to the fore. Next up, how bribes helped a crime ring steal thousands of iPhones. This is inside the United States, where telephone employees were bribed to tell thieves where telephones were shipped. And then the thieves would come along and steal literally thousands of iPhones. The feds, the group, created software to scrape FedEx tracking numbers and then bribe store employees to get details and delivery addresses. The group sent the thieves off to pick up the packages as they were delivered, literally across Brooklyn. So bribery inside the United States causes a huge imbroglio around cell phones and cell phone theft. And our final story for this week is about the wife of Senator Bob Menendez. She is finally going to trial. Her trial was rescheduled because of cancer treatments, and her lawyer was in trial in another case, and now she's going to trial. This one's going to be very interesting because at his trial, her husband, former Senator Robert Menendez, literally threw her under the bus, saying that it was her greed and nefarious characters in action which led to him being labeled as corrupt. Well, the jury didn't buy that, nor did the court, so it's going to be interesting to see her defense. Have a great weekend. This is Tom Fox again. 10 for 10 is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network. I'd also urge you to check out the Daily Compliance News, which posts every week from Monday to Friday, where I give 4 curated stories of bribery, corruption, and compliance events that will allow you to help you start your day as well. So check out the Daily Compliance News and subscribe or rate and review to both 10 for 10 and the Daily Compliance News. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of 10 for 10. I hope you'll check out the newest podcast in the Compliance Podcast Network, the Compliance Tip of the Day. In Compliance Tip of the Day, I give a 5 to 8 minute summary of one tip that you can integrate into your compliance program or put together for greater compliance program efficiency. Finally, if you're a Sherlock Holmes fan, I am preparing a new season of Adventures in Compliance where I go through the 4 novels of Sherlock Holmes. Hear it on the Compliance Podcast Network.